I first wanted to talk to you about the NFL owners' meetings. The NFL, pretty much the big thing that seems to have come out of the owners' meetings is the rule change about basically all chop blocks are now illegal. And they went ahead and expounded upon what the difference between the chop block and the cut block is, and they've expanded the definition of what the chop block is. So it seems like, Russell, that the NFL is basically saying, under the guise of player safety, we're getting rid of something that's been in the NFL for over 70 years.
Yeah. And that's where it's going to be very, very interesting because, we're basically talking about, well, let's make it simple. The NFL doesn't want you to hit a player high, and he doesn't want you to hit a player low. So where do they want you to hit the player?
Well, then the question is, doesn't part of it come down to the NFL? This is what Richard Sherman said in his interview over the weekend with ESPN Sunday Conversation. He said that people are making decisions about what's going on the field who've never played the game.
Yes, I understand that. And, guess what? That's been going on for about 70, 80 years as well. So, that wasn't exactly breaking news. We have to find a kind of a middle ground here, okay? I'm all in favor of player safety. But I remember, a couple of years ago when they talked about the, not hitting high and then players were hitting low. And I'm not telling players they hit low. That's not my point. My point is there seems to be this constant tweaking of the rules, okay? And I think what it's doing, it's making it listen, officiating this game, Josh, is very difficult, okay? I think a lot of people have been highly critical, and rightfully so, of the performance of the officials as of late. And as things go on, it seems more and more gets added to their plates, which is making their job even more difficult, which is why I think you probably should have full-time referees so you can spend the entire offseason understanding all these changes.
Is there something that's keeping the NFL from having full-time referees? Because we know it can't be a money issue. The NFL is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
I don't know what it is. I know people have called for it for a long time. And I think one of the things that has hurt the league in terms of developing their officials is not having a NFL Europe anymore or the World League of American Football. There is no developmental league for the NFL, which means I think it's hurt players, okay? I think it's hurt officials. For as successful as a sport as the NFL is and football is, okay, the decision to stop NFL Europe, I think it's come back and haunted them a little in terms of quality of play.
Do you think the NFL then would ever consider having a developmental league in the future? Because we know the NFL is looking for ways to expand the product, make more money, and the assumption would be, well, having a developmental league is one way of doing that. Maybe the NFL Europe wasn't the way to do it. Maybe instead of having a developmental league, that's league side instead.
Well, also keep in mind the original version of the World League of American Football included a number of teams in the United States: New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Carolina had a team. It's kind of mix and match. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's strictly a domestic thing where they keep it over here. But there's something that has to be done because, right now the developmental league, and some people will claim this forever anyway, the developmental league is college football, okay? But the game is evolving, the game is changing, the rules are changing constantly, and I think it's just adding to the confusion. And since, now the way we practice in the NFL, we limit contact throughout the year, okay? I think that has hurt the game. I think that has hurt the development, especially of, everybody talks about the running game's been de-emphasized, Josh. I think one of the reasons is, every once in a while now you find an offensive line that kind of gets the hang of it. I see more and more at the beginning of the year offensive lines spending half the season trying to get their act together because they just don't get the proper work.
We're talking with Russell Baxter of Bleacher Report. He writes columns NFL, covers the NFL. I wanted to look at a column that you wrote recently for Bleacher Report. You talked about different free agents, under-the-radar moves that will pay off big. You can find that article at BleacherReport.com. And I wanted to go through a couple of these names. And one of the names you mentioned is the Eagles signing of Brandon Brooks.
Yes. I mean, I think he is a very effective guard. The Eagles have, other than Jason Peters, they have a somewhat young offensive line. Okay? He has spent most of his years in Houston as a starter. You put him on the right side. And he is a guy who is a good run blocker. And this is what the Eagles need to do. Listen, the best move that the Eagles made in the offseason was getting Jim Schwartz. I don't think there's any question about that. And he's we've heard him say, it's almost like saying, don't pigeonhole me into playing I'm 4-3 or 3-4. What I'm going to play is attack, okay? And the Eagles' problems on defense the last couple of years, the 3 years under Jim Kelly, are especially when it came to stopping the pass. But as we know, the best tonic for a defense is the ground game. And a ground game that controls the clock, not a ground game that gets you 40 and 50. Listen, 40 and 50-yard runs are not bad, don't get me wrong. But a ground game, when Denver won the Super Bowl this year, okay, they barely averaged over 100 yards rushing in the 3 playoff games. But I think they had 30 carries, 33 carries, and 28 carries. The carries sometimes are more important than the yards.
Right, because you're balancing the offense. You're having a situation where you're not being too heavy one direction or the other with the offense, so that the opposing defense can't predict. And when you mix in the run, you're keeping your defense off the field. Yes,
I mean, it's the one game. Listen, most of us don't play professional football, correct?
Not after my knees get all shredded up.
Right, okay. Most of us have played keep away.
Right.
Okay? And football, in some ways, is a game of keep away.
Looking at the Eagles, you mentioned Jim Schwartz being important. I wanted to ask you, looking at the types of guys that they brought in, it seems like they all fit that attacking style defense. And the guy to me that I felt on the defensive side that really, tells me that this is a serious change of philosophy when it comes to defense is bringing in Rodney McLeod, because this is a safety who is multifaceted, but he also is a hard hitter.
Oh, there's no question about it. And that's why he has, listen, he was in Buffalo. He's got 3 former Bills on the defense as well with Bradham and Brooks and Leotis McKelvin. So these are guys who will contribute to the team. Not necessarily, it's always interesting when you see, a number of guys come over from a team. And we know free agency is the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's who you know, it's who you work with, you bring them over. Okay? A lot of times, let's put it this way, don't assume, I'm not saying it won't happen, don't assume that all 3 of those guys may even be with the team come September. Because a lot of times you come in there and you serve as a tutor for other guys. Those guys are all still going to have to work for their spots. I mean, I expect Bradham and McKelvin for sure. McKelvin can give you stuff on the return game as well. Brooks, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know what they're going to do in the draft. I don't know what else the Eagles are going to do in terms of trade. But at the very least, Jim Schwartz has 3 people there who can teach these Eagles his system of defense. And when last we saw Jim Schwartz coach in the defense, it wasn't shabby. 4th in the league, 11th against the run, 54 sacks, I think 30 takeaways for the Buffalo Bills in 2014.
And people forget with Jim Schwartz, even when he was the head coach of the Lions obviously weren't the most successful team, but they are the Lions. He still had solid defenses there, and he was drafting and picking a lot of guys to play in that defense who went on to have good careers under him.
Oh, listen, I think Jim Schwartz is maybe one of your classic better coordinator than head coach types. Okay, I mean, I know he made a playoff appearance there, but his last couple of years there, the team got off to, if they got off to a good start, they faded. He had one year where they lost 6 of their last 7 games, I think, after a decent start. The one year they started 4-4 and they lost their last 8 games, all after the playoff season in 2011. And he came at a time, he came at a time when they were, suffering from an 0-16 season, and then they got Matthew Stafford, then they got Ndamukong Suh. But it's also, listen, it's not all on short. Let's not, the Lions, this is a franchise that hasn't won a playoff game since 91. They haven't won a championship since 1957. They're the only NFC team never to appear in a Super Bowl. And they're one of only 4 teams in the league not to make the Super Bowl: Cleveland, Jacksonville, and Houston right now. And look what we've seen in life. We've seen the general manager get fired, the team president, the offensive coordinator. I think the Lions are pretty intriguing this year. I like what Jim Caldwell did the second half of last season. They went 6-2 after being 1-7. They were a pretty good team. And remember, one of those losses was the Rodgers Hail Mary on a Thursday night.
Speaking of those 4 teams that have never made the Super Bowl, which of those 4 teams do you think has the best chance of ever getting to the Super Bowl first? Because it seems like the Browns, they're just the most dysfunctional franchise in all the NFL. The Jaguars, they don't really seem that close to being able to make a playoff run at this point. The Lions, you're really not sure what you're getting right now. And then the Texans, it really seems dependent on if Bill O'Brien can really build that team into a contender again.
Well, I like what Bill O'Brien has done in Houston. I think people would be very surprised when you look over the last 2 years that he's had, get this, 6 different starting quarterbacks, but 7 different quarterbacks have played for the Texans the last 2 years under him. Okay? They've combined to throw, I want to say it's 49 touchdown passes and 24 picks. Okay? The guys who have come in relief, Yates and Whedon, have all filled the bill very, very well. He's an excellent quarterbacks coach. That, to me, was as big a reason as why Brock Osweiler went there. And they're going to try to duplicate the Denver formula. Okay? They're going to run the football. They've got an explosive wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. They've got a young quarterback opposed to a veteran quarterback, but a guy who can learn under O'Brien. And O'Brien's been around this league. He's been, obviously a successful coach in New England as a coordinator or a quarterback's coach. Obviously, the stint he had at Penn State. It's always difficult to pick these things as far as getting to a Super Bowl. Remember, there's still 13 franchises that haven't won a Super Bowl. If you had to judge right now, Houston looks like a team that could make more noise. I think Jacksonville is coming. I would not rest on Jacksonville because they've got their offense figured out. Now they just need to get their defense figured out.
And Jacksonville also has a defensive-minded coach, so they can get the defense around at some point. Flipping it back,
they just need some better defensive players, though, Josh. So,
of course, that's something they can also address in the draft. Figuring out their draft position, they can probably get a guy, in that position as well.
Well, listen, for them this year, unfortunately, you'll remember what happened. They had the 3rd overall pick in the draft last year with Dante Fowler, who blew out his knee. So they actually get him back this year. But you just look across the board at some of the acquisitions they've made. They spent a lot of money the last 2 years, but the guys who have really risen for the Jaguars are the guys who they have drafted. Blake Bortles threw 35 touchdown passes last year. Remember we used to have the Marx brothers in Miami? Now you have the Allen brothers in Jacksonville, and Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns. They got Julius Thomas a year ago. He came on late last season. Again, they just need to get, especially their secondary, straightened out. As I was writing this morning, this is the kind of symmetry you don't want, Josh. You don't want to be ranked 29th in the league in pass defense and give up 29 touchdown passes in a year.
We're talking with Russell Baxter. He writes for Bleacher Report. He's their NFL columnist. I wanted to flip it back to the NFC East. I feel that in the last 24 hours, the Cowboys have made a couple moves, even though they're not big-name moves. I think that they're very telling about what their plan is. They brought in Alfred Morris to play running back for them. They also brought in Mayawa he used to play for the Raiders, and now he's with the Cowboys. And I've been saying from the beginning that with the Cowboys at number 4, they absolutely should, if he's there, take Joey Bosa.
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, I know a lot of people are thinking for them to take a quarterback. And listen, I think that would be sound strategy, what you're talking about, because maybe they could get one of the quarterbacks in the second round. But they need to address their quarterback situation, okay? Tony Romo is not young anymore. Even if he was healthy last year, Tony Romo is not young. He came in this league in 2003. I know he didn't really start until 2006, but he's got some wear and tear on him. And, these broken collarbones, it actually happened twice last year. He's had trouble finishing seasons, okay? So, and that's even with the offensive line that they have in front of them. So somewhere there. But I agree with you. I mean, you got another attack type of coach as a defensive coordinator in Rod Marinelli there. The biggest thing with the Cowboys last year, you want to talk about, you can talk about Romo and you can try to think, their defense last year, they went from 31 takeaways in 2014, the year that they won 12 games. They had 11 takeaways as a team last year, dead last in the league.
And they were also one of the worst blitzing teams in the NFL as well. They had so much trouble getting to the opposing quarterback, even with Greg Hardy in the lineup.
Yeah, no, listen, they were, you bring Greg Hardy in, he played 12 games, he got you 6 sacks, okay? But, he's not part of your team for the first month of the season. And when you're talking about defensive line play and you're talking about stunts and different things like that, listen, I thought Rod Marinelli did a decent job for what he had, okay? I thought the move to putting Sean Lee outside instead in the middle was a good move as well. But, they're a little more depleted. Remember, they won the division in 2014 because of the keep-away rule, okay? They kept that defense off the field as much as humanly possible, okay? And I think DeMarco Murray kind of got a raw deal in the sense that after he left Dallas, I think there was a notion that, anybody could run behind that offensive line. And as we found out, listen, Darren McFadden had over 1,000 yards, but it just wasn't the case. You want to talk about a drop-off in terms of running the football? Last year, the Cowboys as a team ran for 1,890 yards. The year before, DeMarco Murray ran for 1,845 on his own.
It's amazing, hindsight's 20/20, but one can only imagine.
Oh, I'm sorry, in this case, Josh, hindsight was 29/29.
But still, it seems like if DeMarco Murray would have just stayed in Dallas and not griped so much about the money, maybe the Cowboys could have won the division last year even without Tony Romo.
Well, I don't disagree with that. And I don't know if it was, I don't think it was a DeMarco Murray griping about the money. The Cowboys found themselves, as you know, in a very, very unusual situation, okay? At the same time, they had the guy who led the league in rushing and was the offensive player of the year, eligible for free agency, the same year as the guy who led the league in touchdown receptions. So, listen, it was great what they had in 2014, but I think the miscalculation by the Cowboys was not getting a deal done with one of those guys before they were forced to make a choice on the franchise tag.
Speaking of DeMarco Murray, he's now with the Titans. We know the Titans needed a running back because these last 2 years without Chris Johnson was the first time the franchise had not had an 1,000-yard rusher within 2 non-1,000 rushing yard seasons by a guy since they were the Oilers. So you knew they needed a running back, but how does DeMarco Murray fit with the Titans?
Well, listen, they spent a lot of high draft choices, Josh, on offensive linemen. I think I would have liked it. Well, listen, he's going to get the rock. There's no question about that. They had danced around with all these different backs down there, Cobb and Bishop Sankey, and even had Dexter McCluster in the backfield, and Antonio Andrews, an undrafted free agent. He's going to get the ball, okay? And he's going to get the ball a lot. And him getting the ball a lot benefits Marcus Mariota And, again, he has proven in the past that he can be the workhorse. I mean, I think he joked about the fact that he's very well rested after what happened last year. And he's not, he's not mistaken. Okay? But bizarre set of circumstances, if you wind up plucking the offensive player of the year away from a divisional rival, and yet you can't find room for him to use him on a consistent basis. But I guess that's why everything kind of imploded in Philadelphia to begin with.
One more question before I let you go. The Patriots traded away Chandler Jones for Jonathan Cooper, and some draft picks were involved. It seems like a very odd thing for the Patriots to be giving up on a guy. I mean, yeah, he had some minor trouble off the field, but he still has the potential to be a star player, and get back in return a guy who, so far in his NFL career, has just not lived up to the expectations of a first-round pick.
Yeah, Jonathan Cooper's been a little bit of a mystery. I thought he would do very, very well, especially in Arizona. And he kind of got in Bruce Arians' doghouse, sooner than later, and maybe a fresh start for him works. Listen, I mean, next year I think Dante Hightower and Jamie Collins have contracts. Listen, you know how the Patriots work, okay? They're not going to break the bank to re-sign anyone, okay, except for one guy, and he's constantly giving money back or renegotiating his deal. They're very frugal. And, this is a team that, traded away a Super Bowl MVP, Deion Branch. They traded away Richard Seymour. They cut Lawyer Malloy 6 days before the season opener, okay? So I think he certainly didn't help his cause with the off-the-field stuff, but I guess they felt that he was expendable and they could do without him. I think some people would even make it. I think he was their most talented defensive end, but I think in some ways their most productive and most well-rounded defensive end is Rob Ninkovich.
We've been talking with Bleacher Report NFL columnist Russell Baxter here on the Sports Bash. You can go to Bleacher Report, check out his articles. I highly recommend the 2016 NFL free agents under the radar moves that will pay off big. That was a great article. You also follow him on Twitter. If you type in Russell Baxter in the Twitter, you can find him. But his actual Twitter handle is not. It's Bax, BAX Football Guru. So give him a follow on there as well, folks. Russell, thanks for joining us, and catch you next time.
You got it, sir.